Welcome. So we've got Jay and Michelle McBain, and these are distant relatives of mine that we met at a funeral a few years ago in Brooklyn. And my father's side of the family has very complicated and mysterious relations amongst each other. And I was the nearest one to New York to be sent to this funeral, and I had no idea what I was getting myself into, and lucked out. In addition to paying respects for the deceased, was meeting two wonderful newly discovered relatives and travel friends. So again, welcome, Jay and Michelle.
Absolutely. And it has to be said that great Uncle Willie who passed was 100 years old. So he had a wildly exciting ride too. And so may we all be that lucky.
Yeah, he was the one in the family that there were always the endless stories that nobody knew exactly what to believe or not. I knew him when I was very little, visiting my grandfather. So his brother, that Uncle Willie always had a roll of cash that we weren't sure how he had a dollar to his name, but there was always a 20 for me. So I didn't
I lived to 100. He did something right.
Yeah, and I suppose to that theme that I wish we had recordings of him in that, and then we'll get into themes of the project you two have undertaken to record your own travels. But first, we see the two of you. There's a family as well, and carrying sleeping children up Machu Picchu is quite dedication as parents. So let's talk about it. It sounds like every trip you don't say, is it possible to take your kids? You just say they're coming with us.
Absolutely. This was the big thing. So Jay and I, obviously, we met, at a charity event. We both fell in love based upon our love of travel, and we work in technology. We have so many shared interests, and he swept me off my feet. We went on many travel adventures before we got married and had children. And when I was 9 months pregnant, I had this panic attack that what is going to happen now that we have kids? Are we going to get to travel? Is our world going to change? And we committed to each other that we would welcome our children into our travels and show them the experiences of the world, give them different perspectives than what they're used to here in America, get to meet amazing, incredible people, eat different food, listen to wonderful music, dance to new cultures, and just have a great time. So we made an early on decision and we ran with it.
And now 6 years later, our 6-year-old's been to 50 countries. So
and our 4-year-old's been to 40.
Yeah, we made it work.
Oh, wow. And how do you communicate how special that is, or what, at their age, it's I guess it's impressions. I don't really have a sense, not a parent, of just thinking. I distinctly remember going to Disney when I was 4 years old, but otherwise we weren't big travelers as a family, other than putting me on a plane to New York to visit my grandparents.
And that's funny too, because I was sort of the same. Obviously, coming from immigrant grandparents, we had this sort of thing growing up in Brooklyn, New York, that was, we're in America, speak English and don't travel. And it was a very odd thing. And I always had this impending desire to see the world. Where Jay grew up in a traveling family, his family were road trippers and they were Canadian and they would go all over the United States. So we had different upbringings, but we had this shared desire to just see the world. And when we take our children, some people will say, oh, but they're not going to remember anything. They may not remember the sights or the activities they did. They might not, or maybe they will. And I hope they do. And I take enough photos and write enough blogs that I hope they remember it. But what for me is I want them to have the feeling and the experience of it, right? Because you do see, wow, there are people that don't look like me or dress like me or live like me. And that you do take in as a child. And it shapes your view of the world very early on, how fortunate we are, how important it is to give back and to help others. And many of those things are very core principles. What would you add?
Yeah, and I think that travel isn't a point in time either. So you talk about them getting older. While they're getting older, they're still traveling. So, if COVID relaxes a little bit, in January, we'll be in Antarctica with them.
Well,
as we go forward, there's always going to be these memories, and they'll hit the 100 country mark. And while we're doing that, we can go back and we'll end up hitting some of those same countries again because we always do, and find new things. But it's going to be part of their DNA. And if they want to go backwards, Michelle takes 3,000 pictures a day. She has this wonderful blog and videos and stories. And I think the stories are the most important thing. So they'll always have this record, and they won't remember it because they might have been sleeping on that, hike up Machu Picchu. But they might remember some of the smells. They might remember, some fleeting things like you did at Disney. You don't remember every little moment, but it's this idea that you were together as a family and you were exploring other cultures.
Fantastic. And I have this theory again as a non-parent, but things like those flights, it seems to me it's more a function of the parenting than the child. It's parents that seem to be very engaged and not over entitled or demanding attention from everyone, seem to have kids that are the best behaved. So I feel like there's a lot of mindset that it must be very stressful to go on these long flights, but the kid seems to react to the parents more than the reverse is my hypothesis.
You hear these stories about like the horror stories where like a baby is on a plane crying for, all these hours. And the first time we did it, we went to Canada to visit Jay's grandmother who was ill and visit his mom and dad. And the second time we went to Japan, which was 19 hours on a plane. And so we buckled in and hoped for the best. And to be honest, there's a couple tips and tricks that are really critical. If you have a young infant, many international flights have those carriers that lay down as a bassinet for your child, so you don't have to hold with them in your arm. But it's a first come, first serve thing. We got very fortunate that, in a lot of Asian cultures, they are very respectful towards families and children, and they immediately saw us. We didn't know about that, and they offered it to us, and they allowed us to have this experience. She slept for the 12 hours, which she had never even had done at home, because of a giant white noise lulling machine for an infant. And then she woke up, they brought us all of this delicious cuisine, and she was playing peekaboo with the person who was so nice to want to play with her. And then we arrived, and it was like, oh, this is easier than we thought. That wasn't so hard. What do people complain about? So we might have gotten fortunate, and I can't say every child is the same, and I can't say the experience is different. In fact, I find it more challenging as they get older because their attention span's a little different. There's a unique age where you can sit down and watch a 2-hour movie. And there's a unique age where you sleep like 8 hours a day. And then there's that in between where you just want to run up and down the aisle. And we just we did it so often that it wasn't like a weird thing. They were just used to it. They enjoy it. When they see an airplane, they're like, I want to go on the airplane. If daddy's traveling, I want to go with daddy. Why didn't you take me on the airplane? So they enjoy it.
There's actually there's a human psychology here. And I grew up in a road tripping family. And we'd pack up the car in Calgary, Alberta, or Edmonton, Alberta, and drive to, Southern California with a tent trailer in tow. And there's this idea, if you go on a road trip, that, if you're going for 3 hours, the last hour of it is kind of like painful. But if you're going for 10 hours, your brain kind of sets in and your lot in life is handed to you. That last hour, again, is kind of painful. If you get on a flight for 19 hours, you kind of, as an adult, you think about it, I'm not going to start to freak out after 3 hours because there's going to be, 15 or 16 hours of freaking out. So what ends up happening is the last hour again is this painful part. So you kind of set in, and kids at some point, I think when they're really young, understand, now that they've buckled in for a while and it's, it's not ending, it's not landing. We're not on a short trip here. So you just kind of buckle in as a human and just ride it through.
We do.
And I know you guys share with me a passion for road tripping, driving around, and a country that you've driven around that I have not, other than around Okinawa, is Japan. And I think many people are intimidated. They're worried that the street signs might not have any Romanized signage. That for many drivers, it's going to be on a different side of the road. It's going to be confusing. It's why bother when there's such extensive public transport network? So walk through that decision and what you got out of a road trip in Japan.
Yeah, I've driven, I think I might be one of the only people on the planet to have got a speeding ticket on every drivable continent. And I checked, and Hertz doesn't rent cars in Antarctica, so I'm safe there. But when we met, the day we met, I was just planning a 7-country Southern Africa road trip with my rollerblades, and she had just got back from there. So it was this wonderful conversation, one of our first conversations. But I look around the world, and I look at every continent and every place. For Japan, for example, we wanted to do a number of things. We were celebrating our daughter's first birthday, so we wanted to do it on Mount Fuji. And you have a story there, and it's not the easiest place to get through public transit. We wanted to see Osaka, we wanted to see the different cities, but we wanted to go to Hiroshima. And again, it's not the kind of place where there's a train or bus that leaves on the hour every hour from Tokyo. There's a thing about having a car in certain places that you actually are in more control of your travel. The luggage in the trunk. It's not sitting at a hotel or with a concierge or at an airport. You're not trying to figure out what to do. Your travel is also has more freedom to it. If you like a place, you can stay longer. If you want to move on quicker, I think of like Chevy Chase in Vacation, walks up to the Grand Canyon and kind of goes, oh, yeah, okay, let's go. It allows you that freedom. And a lot of times we'll get in at 2 a.m. to our B&B or to our hotel or to our wherever we're staying. The fact of the matter is you get more control, and you get to do what you want to do, look at the scenery, look left, look right, and take in more than maybe you would have if you took a high-speed train or you were forced into a bus tour.
Yeah, and as we were discussing, earlier, I feel that if you're on a group tour, and though some of them are great, I've taken many, I've enjoyed it, I appreciate the history that they often provide, but they're often very regimented in their schedule. We're going to exit here, you have 10 minutes to get out, you're going to take your photos, you're going to get back on, we're going to meander back onto the next site, checklist. Where we like to see the tourist things, obviously, those are important. You don't want to go to New York Times Square and then the Eiffel Tower or the Empire State Building or anything. You want to see those big things, but you also want to make sure you get off the beaten path. And sometimes you're just meandering and you find something really exciting that you didn't expect to be there, a local festival or a street fair, and you want to spend some more time and enjoy the people and the culture, and being on your own schedule, having your own vehicle, and not being committed to getting back on that cruise ship at a certain time, or getting back on that train at a certain time, or that bus. It allows you to just enjoy your vacation at your speed. So where you find the ability to say, we didn't even book tomorrow's hotel. We love this town. Why don't we stay an extra night? Sometimes we do that. We don't plan the whole trip before we even get there, because if you can find internet, you can book pretty regularly in many places. And so we don't restrict ourselves. We get a rough outline, and then we allow ourselves the ability to play it by ear on what we really love.
And Devjit in the comments, he's saying the tolls on the Japanese expressways make a speeding ticket look cheap in comparison. But renting a car in Japan is a great decision if you're deviating off the Tokaido Shinkansen route.
Yeah, I have this crazy thing with rental cars where I worked for IBM for 17 years. Whatever happened, IBM Canada struck a deal with Hertz that I could rent a car in any country in the world, in any downtown, in any airport, for $30 a day, full-size car.
Yeah.
I don't know how they struck that deal, and I don't know why it still works, that I haven't worked there in a decade, but I still get the deal. But the fact of the matter is...
now you're cut off, though.
So those in the IBM HR department are taking away my access as we speak. And
well, on that point, those stick around for a lot of companies, and my supposition is that the company HR departments, they're getting goals and boosts or kickbacks, if you want to call it that, from the rental agencies for hitting a certain amount of volume. So I don't think they're actually trying to remove people because it's helping them hit their targets without the cost to them. So I guess it'd be the agencies that potentially would care, but then they don't want to lose a customer either.
Yeah, but as Michelle says, we live in a kind of a planes, trains, and automobiles world, and we book our travel now that we have internet access pretty well globally. We take our travel differently. We don't book hotels until kind of the next day or that day. But we're always looking at options. When we traveled around the world last year to go to a conference in Australia, we hit 15 countries on the way.
In 4 continents.
And 4 continents. So as we're going those, we're trying to figure out, okay, now we're in, we flew into Paris. We want to get down to the southern coast because we want to go to Monaco. So now we're in Marseille. How's best to go to Nice? How's it best to go to Monaco? Here's the public transportation. Here's the trip. It wasn't working the way we planned. I always had in my back pocket this $30 thing where we could throw our luggage into the trunk and get back on our own schedule. And then once we're there, let's go back and fly out of Nice and get, flying east again. But this idea of hitting countries in a way that is much more flexible now and more on demand, in time, where you can book a car hours ahead of time or minutes ahead of time and walk in, or book a hotel minutes ahead of time as you're walking in the door.
Fantastic. And you mentioned visiting Hiroshima on that trip. Speak about that experience.
It was something that was interesting because, I had people that were cautioning me against it, that I worked with, and they thought it might be disrespectful. They thought that it might not be the, best place for Americans to, to show up, as a family and as a tourist destination. And, we thought about it. We researched on the internet. We read other people's stories, maybe even people that are listening today. We read their stories, and we didn't get that same feeling. And, part of renting a car and driving all of Japan was really to get to Hiroshima. And the experience we had was the exact opposite. They were welcoming. They wanted to educate. They wanted to be open. It was all about peace. And it was one of the, for all the travel we've done, it was one of the highlights of all of our trips. And, you can't listen to others because you'll always hear people with caution. Go put something on Facebook and you'll get, a dozen, people always, kind of putting up little roadblocks or things like that. But you go deep.
How many of them have ever, experienced what they're suggesting, that roadblock? I mean, I spent a summer in college studying in Japan, and Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I felt it was almost my duty to visit those as an American and reflect. And there's no vilification. I mean, that's not the milieu of it at all. It's about education. It's about spreading peace. It's about the consequences of what can happen when there isn't peace. If I could snap my fingers, I'd send every American there to spend a day and a night and reflect on it.
Absolutely. It was and that's the thing, outside of just the, popular tourist destinations, often on our journeys, we reflect on places that have really sometimes gruesome history that is so important to remember and understand, right? Phnom Penh and the Cambodian killing fields that happened. I think I cried my eyes out through that entire walk listening to the audio track of people's stories. But that is an important conversation to be told and a lesson to be remembered, because if we don't educate ourselves towards history, then we're doomed to repeat it, right? And it's so critical as world travelers that we want to really unify the world and bring countries and cultures and experiences together to say that, there's no, Aristotle had a great quote. It's one of my favorites. He said, "I am not a citizen of Athens or Greece, but of the world." And if we're global citizens, then you truly have to understand and accept and appreciate the differences and uniqueness, and that we've all had highlights and lowlights of our countries and histories. And if we're not open-minded and have those hard discussions or look at those hard realities, then we wouldn't become a better people.
Yeah,
beautifully said.
One of my original trips before I met Michelle actually was to rent a car, and I went through 15 countries in Europe. Started in Germany and did a big circle around Germany, but my end point was Auschwitz, and kind of one of the worst and best days of my life. Going through there, in tears the whole day. But I got to work backwards from Auschwitz back to Berlin and buy a bunch of books and trace it, as I drove, and learned so much about World War II. And I know you're a fan of history as well. But immersing myself to that level was more than I could have ever got in a university course, or more than I could have ever got from a book. And we tend to do those things, is immerse ourselves in history, by being there and learning and engaging. But the other thing is, history is written by the victor. So, when you go to Vietnam and go through their museums, America is actually the enemy, and still is. And their depiction of Agent Orange and chemical warfare and nuclear and everything else, you do get different histories, and learn more about your own culture by the way it's written by others and viewed on by others. And you get more of a worldview shaped by, different opinions.
Without the conscious or unconscious bias that exists growing up in a certain location.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm thinking people can say, oh, well, everybody knows this or that. But I'm thinking a few jobs ago, we just sitting at the company cafe in Atlanta, and then a new executive promoted, a big shot sales guy, multiple decades in the industry, was promoted to run the international division. And one of the executives had just been back from a stint setting up a Germany office, and he was talking about visiting Auschwitz. And the guys and the new executive said, "What's that?" And around the table were people from Egypt, from China, from Jordan, from the U.S., an Italian, Peruvian, and everybody just dropped their food. But it was like, I think you need to go visit the new Germany office and book a few extra days. And to his credit, I mean, he spent time in that new role, then starting to learn about the places that he was doing business in. And I think still American executives have this idea that a productive business trip to an overseas office is business only. Order food into the conference room and make everybody sit there for 12 hours and then go back to your hotel. And I mean, both of you have international careers, and I've always, if locals say like, and the work is important, it needs to get done when it's done, and they say, there's some really special experience we've arranged for you, or would you like to try this? I say yes, whatever it is. Happy to go out. And if nobody's going out, I will just go out and walk around and tell them the next day, I went down to this museum at night, I walked this, and they're always like, oh, none of the Americans have ever bothered to do that.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm so grateful. And we talked earlier, and I just, this is my favorite quote that I've ever heard, but it said, if you want to get to know the tourist destinations, ask the concierge. If you want to get the local destinations, ask the maid. And you can find, the real true area. Like, what do you do for fun? What do you do? Not the whitewashed, westernized version of it. I don't want that. I didn't come here to stay at a Holiday Inn. I came here to experience your food and your culture and your music and your nightlife. And, we walk 30 miles a day, sometimes meandering in the wrong direction, trying to just see and have as much of the culture and experience as we can to really appreciate it.
Fantastic. And at DPS, we're always curious about how your profession, first how you make your lifestyle work, professionally travel this, and how it influences and informs your travel. So you both, I've pasted your short bios, which are not short and very accomplished. So in short words, each of you say what you do professionally and how that informs your travel approach, your perspective on travel.
Sure. So I could start. I'm the VP of Global Channel and Digital Strategy at the JS Group. I work in technology my entire career for 14 years. We have some people coming in here. I'm also a mother, in addition to being a world traveler. We have Brooklyn and Hallie. And so, part of my journey in education, I was a global business major and I minored in peace studies. So my entire goal was to really get to know people and the world and just try to immerse myself in cultures and understanding.
We are not over there. We are over here.
And how about you? What does Daddy do? Do you know?
What does Daddy do? Works on the computer.
Hey, I'm over here.
So I've been in the technology industry for 26 years. I worked for IBM and Lenovo and other big Fortune companies. I ran my own company as a CEO for 7 years, a technology software company. And now I'm an industry analyst. I'm just a grumpy old curmudgeon that gives my opinions to the people that will listen.
Fantastic. So you're both in technology. I think near and dear to many people's hearts in this group is this concept of digital nomadism, which I think can sometimes get a bad rap or a stereotypical rap, but this idea of having a profession that you want to be location independent should be more possible now. But I've talked to people that have really struggled in this change. So I think for at least the next few years, travel restrictions will be here to stay in some form or another. People might be looking at longer stints in places. what are your thoughts on making, say someone wants to have the accomplishments you've had, but trying to do it more in location independent?
Yeah, it's well, I mean, the future of work has forever been altered. COVID has created a world where, I work for a company, Forrester, that tracks this. We talk to hundreds of thousands of people, and we pull together predictions. So right now, it's about 70% of people may return to cubicle farms, in the downtown headquarters. You have a new future of work that's going to be more dispersed. You had companies in the past like Yahoo and IBM that actually pulled back on remote work. And Marissa Meyer, and there's examples where people were.
She had her personal nursery for herself.
This idea that people at home are just not working, and they're skipping and stuff. Where it's the exact opposite. Now that everybody's at home, you miss breakfast, you miss lunch, you're hungry, and then by 8:00 at night, you're trying to unplug, and you're figuring like, oh my goodness, there's no commute. I'm giving the company 50% more than what I did in the past. So, I think there's a huge opportunity here to, drive a new remote work. And, in what I do and a lot of what professionals do today, it's location independent. You've got, good broadband internet now globally. You've got this ability to do it on the water. You've got this ability to do it, via different countries. And, if you are in a job that's really around thought leadership and engaging, and today it's all digital anyway, and this will be part of the new normal, it's really looking good for travel and nomads and things like that can work and really do it a different way. I mentioned that big trip last year where I had a speech in Australia, and we just backed it out and touched on 15 countries on the way there, and I circumnavigated the globe just to get to the speech. So right now I look at my work as inspiration to travel and figuring out, like you said, how do you take that morning to go to the museum? How do you take that extra day or the extra weekend to go either rent a car, to jump on a bus, or to go and really immerse yourself in that culture, which again makes you more important to that client, what makes you more important to the people you're working with because you care about them.
Right. You're very valuable. And so part of the Machu Picchu story, actually, so I work full time, obviously, in my role, but I also decided that I was going to pursue my MBA. And so one of the things I loved most about my undergraduate degree was I went to Manhattan College in New York City, and there was quite a few opportunities to study abroad. So I studied abroad in Italy 1 year, and then the next year I studied abroad in Portugal and Spain. So I always, that was sort of what was sparked my love of just being experiential and living in a different country or culture and having that daily regiment. So when I pursued my MBA almost 15 odd years later, I said, there's never going to be a right time. I'm a mom. I work full time. I have 2 children. I'm going to have heart surgery in a year, but I'm going to do this too, because that sounds like a logical idea. And I like to take on big initiatives. So, but I was a nursing mom, and I actually asked my professor, I said, I would love to do this trip. It was to Peru, and you were going to go to Lima and Cusco and Madre de Dios, because the whole project was about the sustainability of the rainforest and helping the indigenous people of the rainforest with a lot of the informal gold mining that was occurring, which was causing mercury poisoning in the waters of the Amazon, causing deforestation to the most mega diverse area in the world, biodiverse area in the world, and also impacting the people, because with this influx of people and poisoning of the water and the local food that the fish that people eat, it was causing mercury damage, and children were being born with deformities. And there was a lot of negativity, but they didn't understand the long-term impact. So our goal for the MBA project was, how can you learn more about the people and the place and help them create sustainable livelihoods that can help them with a 3-legged stool, meaning not just culturally and financially, but ethically as well. And so it was an amazing experience. And I asked my professor, can I take my family, because I am a nursing mom, and I assure you I will do the work. And she was a very strong, forward-thinking woman and said, absolutely, we bring our husbands. Why can't you bring your husband? And I brought my husband and the kids. And when we went to the events and the excursions, they were allowed to join us as their spouses were, the professors. And it sparked something in me that I thought, someday after my corporate America stint is over, I think I would love to make an impact in the world, and being a professor and what they do, teaching people. But again, to Jay's point, it's not just something you read in a textbook. And we did read before we went there, and we did a project when we returned, but we went in person. We interviewed people of that country. We went to the aqua fish farms. We went to the Castagna Brazil nut farms. We met people and asked them, how can we help them? What do they do for ecotourism? And brainstorm using finance and marketing and all of the things that you learn in school as to how you can help a group of people in the world. And I think that's the bigger portion of our travel, especially for me, is how can I make an impact? How can I make a difference in the world? We don't want to just see it and take it in, but we want to go back. We want to build a school. We want to do something that's meaningful and leave behind something really powerful in the world and in our children and our children's children.
Wonderful, beautifully said. And I'm thinking, I've been going to New York all my life to visit the family on my father's side, and had in Philadelphia. I had a roommate from Brooklyn in college who was very much the iconic New Yorker, born and raised in Brooklyn, that says, "Why do I need to go out to the world? The world's all here."
So, I hear that a lot.
How did you? How can you convince your friends, your high school classmates who have that mentality? Have you convinced any to break out of it? And how do you do it if you have?
So, again, most people that you meet, I think, are in their mind aspirational travelers, or they don't care, right? They say, like, to your point, we have it all here. We have mountains, we have beaches, we have city, we have country. Why do we need to leave? And New York is one of the most beautiful places in the world. I love it. I loved growing up there. But again, for me, and this was a great conversation actually in the Every Passport Stamp group, where somebody said, how long do you have to be in a certain place to allow yourself to say that you've truly been there? And to that point, how many people are in New York City that never even leave New York City and grew up in the United States? And then, can you say that they're not American because they haven't seen the other states or the other parts of the country? So I think it is a very challenging question, and I don't think there's a right answer. I just try to share my stories. I try to share my photography and my videos and the experiences we have, and hope that it sparks some sort of inspiration in people to say, wow, I never knew that existed there. Or actually, in my Petra Jordan blog that I shared recently, somebody said, I always just thought it was that one quintessential picture that you see in front of the bank, and then that was it. And I said, no, it's one of the most large areas, and the people and the food, and there's so much to see and do. And if you don't know what you don't know, right? I mean, I think all of us are just floating around, and there's the popular tourist destinations, which are so beautiful, the Paris, France, and Rome, Italy, and all of those wonderful places in the world. But some of the most amazing places for me are the places that nobody even thinks to go. I mean, I loved Port Elizabeth in South Africa, and just places that I think are, this is my to-do destination. And that question always comes up. I'm sure it has for you as well. Where's your favorite place? I'd actually throw it back to you. Where's your favorite place that you've ever been to, Stefan?
Yeah, the default, I say, is China. I speak the language, and that makes the big, wonderful destination, but speaking the language boosts it so much. And I'm hearing your pronunciation and where you studied abroad, that you've got several languages under your belt to some degree, and I imagine that informs a lot of your favorites as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And well, I was just going to say that Google Translate has been a lifesaver for us too. But go ahead.
That's it. I get paid to have an opinion on things, and that's what I do for a living. And I actually don't have an opinion on what you just said. So, we're in other communities as well. Your whole life is a Venn diagram of interests and things you do and communities that you're in. So one thing about our travel is that we've, by boat, been thousands and thousands of miles in the United States and Canada. We've touched every major city, Boston and New York and Philadelphia and Baltimore and Washington, D.C. and Miami. We've been up and down the eastern seaboard by boat. So we might be in the 1 percentile of people who have logged cruising miles by boat. And you don't check off any countries here.
Yeah.
I've also driven through 48 states and 10 provinces.
I'm not so good. I'm ashamed.
But when I ask people, their version of travel might be a different river. It might be a different waterway. It could be a different part of the ocean. For some people, it's a different campground in a different state. My mom's on a RV trip, all through Australia and the US and things. So everyone's version of getting out is different. And again, there's no right answer. It's what's important and what can make you learn as an individual and expand your boundaries. But whatever those boundaries are, it shouldn't be for any of us to define them. I've got people that I look up to, like you, that are done 200 countries and have seen everything. And given the fact that I want to go by boat and I want to go by car and I want to do other things as well that don't involve travel, that may not be in the cards. So there's no argument for me. It's whatever's right for the person.
But
I'm still going to tease my relatives in Brooklyn that go to the city meeting Manhattan like once every 2 years. But I'll take your point on the overall concept. I'm curious by boat. I mean, what are these river cruises? Are these your own conveyance? How are you doing some of these?
Yeah, it's our own boat. So we have a little boat that has a couple of beds inside, a little kitchen, a little bathroom, and when we hit a marina, by no means are we anywhere close to the biggest boat. We're not the fanciest boat, but we log a lot of miles. And there's a lot of people in that culture that sit around the marina. They buy a nice boat and they sit at their, they might be at a tennis club and they spend all their time not on the court playing, but they spend it at the club.
We see it in Seattle on Lake Union every night on our walk. And these boats, I mean, some of them do not move in an entire year, but every so often somebody's sitting there drinking wine.
We had a big boat for a while that was $5 per mile. So when we lived in upstate New York, it was thousands of dollars just to cruise down to New York City. We could have gone on a cruise in the Caribbean for cheaper. So a lot of these big boats that you see, they're obviously expensive, but to run them is more expensive. So people end up sitting with their friends at the club, looking at their boats or sitting on their boats than they do actually using them. And that's okay. I mean, for them.
But not for us.
But not for us. I mean, our time at the marina is getting gas in the boat and taking off, and getting the miles under and seeing new things, not checking off things like countries and things like that, but actually getting into new places.
And I think the biggest thing for me is we're adventurers. I would say that's probably the best way to describe how, his dad had this funny story that he told him when he was a child, which was they would be driving somewhere and his dad was the equivalent of an accountant, an IRS accountant. And he would say, son, we can't go back that way. And Jay would say, why, Dad? And he said, the assassins. Well, there were no assassins chasing Jim, but he never wanted to go the same way twice. And that was something that Jay grew up doing. And it's kind of like our joke. We never go the same way twice. We're always looking for a new adventure, whether it's by sea or air or plane or train. We just want to see as much of the world. And I want to share those stories. So for those people in Brooklyn, I'm not on Jay's. I think everyone should travel. I think everyone should get out there and they should just explore and appreciate and learn from each other. And I think that at the end of the day, you realize we're more alike than we're different. I look at people and they may dress differently. They may be wearing a hijab, or they may be wearing, a bikini, or they may be wearing something different, or they may eat different types of food or listen to different music. But they care about their family. They care about their country. They have pride. They want people to come and love where they live. They want to share their stories. And if you come with an open mind and an open heart, willing to learn and listen to their stories, then I don't think there's any greater gift to an adventure than wanting to learn more about those people and their home.
That's fantastic. And I think a lot of people with the current situation are thinking about new styles of travel and looking at RVs. You've mentioned boating. For people that just have no concept, I mean, where to begin thinking about is owning a boat, renting a boat, is any of that for them? Are there particular sites or ways to think about it that could get people started?
Yeah, one of the things I study in my professional life is communities. I'm fascinated by people like you, that what do you read, where do you go, and most importantly is who do you follow?
Or who do you influence?
And the idea that the world has, 7.5 billion people, but it narrows down into these communities. So if you like tennis, or if you like golf, or if you like boating, or if you like travel, you end up narrowing down pretty quickly. There's certain magazines, there's certain associations like the Travel Century Club, there's certain blogs and podcasts like this one that you listen to. As you narrow it down, and as you ask people that have this wanderlust and this need for travel, it actually becomes the law of a few. There's a few things that they trust. There's a few things that they plug into. And you could probably rhyme off on the top of your head, maybe a couple of dozen people that you look up to in terms of guidance and advice and different things. And you're one of the super connectors in this space. So when I look at travel, which is one of the dozen things we do on our Venn diagram, I look to you and I look to others in the travel communities to influence best practices. I listen to you when you have the credit card, trickery on there, and how to get the most out of, kind of travel hacking, and how to get the most out of hotels, how to get the most out of flights, how to do the planes. I mean, I love that stuff because you're taking the best of the community and you're applying it to yourself. But the next day I'm going to be out in the boating community and talk about renting versus buying versus chartering versus this. We're going to end up buying a sailboat, and kind of the final thing on the bucket list is going across the ocean. So we're going to head over to Europe, and one of the things that well is to hit a lot of countries. It's tough because they're small little islands. One of the best ways to hit these islands, like renting a car, is going with your own boat and talking up and being able to handle the culture. And when you have time to spend a few days or a few weeks on that island, is how do you hit the last 50 countries in the world? I would love to do it by sailboat. And that's when boating and travel, which is this Venn diagram, overlaps.
And like, for example, in the recreational vehicle opportunities, his mom is quite an inspiration as well. She was a retired principal who they would often do principal swaps with Australia and Canada. And she met a very good friend who lives in Perth. And she decided that she was going to go. The person that she's dating has a daughter who married somebody who lives in Australia. And they bought a camper van. And they decided to spend 6 months driving around the country and getting as far as they can. And they've done that several times. And, there's so many different ways to experience a place. But often if you just land in a major city and then you leave, you miss the journey. You miss the country roads. You miss the farms, and you miss the off the beaten path people. And that's sort of the nice thing about taking different voyages and different transportation methods, because there's places that we love that maybe we didn't spend enough time in, but we want to go back when we are retired and have more time and spend months there. We've talked about living 2 or 3 months at a time in some of our favorite places, going to Cambodia, going to Costa Rica, going to South Africa, and just spending months immersing ourselves, southern France. And there's so many places. But I think that is, for me, the biggest thing is, how do you think about things differently in your journey? How do you just say, I've seen it this way, but what if I try another? Italy is a great example. I studied abroad there. It was my first trip I took with my mom and my grandmother, who neither had an active passport. I had to convince them as true Yorkers. And we went, and I cried when I left because I said, this is just the most beautiful place, the food, the people, the music. I want to live here. And I just had something light up in me. And I think we've all been there, where you just fall in love with the place, and it just becomes so beautiful to you. You're like, I just want to spend as much time as possible here. And I studied abroad there. And then years later, I was 6 months pregnant with my youngest daughter, Callie. I brought my mom, and Jay went to help move in my oldest stepdaughter, Denitsa, to college. She's in law school, and another 2 future lawyers we have. So that'll be good for our family, especially visits. And we went on this amazing journey with my mom, who always wanted to go. We're part Sicilian, and she wanted to go to Greece and Sicily. These were just dream trips of hers. And my mom was a single mom who raised me by herself. She didn't have a lot of the funds to allow us to do a lot of the traveling that she would have wanted to do. too. And I said, now that I have the gift of being able to give this gift to her, then I took her on this multi-country, which was sort of self-serving, because there are some countries that Jay and I debate on. I've been, or he has been, and we try to see new places together. So, France, he's been several times. He didn't want to go back. I had been to 80 countries, but I had not yet been to France. I'm like, we have to go to France. This is crazy. So we went together, and my mom and I and Brooklyn, and we ate a lot of gelato. I call Callie my buffet baby. That was a great trip. If you're pregnant, I highly recommend a Mediterranean cruise. But we saw so many different places and countries and cultures. And also, I think that's important too. I'm maybe more adventurous when I'm with Jay and less adventurous who you're traveling with matters. If you're with an older parent, or you're older and you don't have, the ability to walk long periods of time, or, there are people that have limitations. You want to take that into consideration for the convenience of the trip as well, and make sure that you're doing the right thing to serve your needs and you have a good experience, because the worst thing that could happen is you push too much or too hard, and you don't enjoy it. You want to enjoy the journey.
You guys are both so well spoken. How do you get so well spoken? There's a professional background.
You do it for
there's a way of clearly of thinking and preparing and organizing your thoughts to be so eloquent.
Well, that's so kind of you to say, because I always get nervous when I don't have questions. but I said to Jay last night, we were up at like 4 a.m. because Corona's thrown our hours crazy, and he was doing global presentations for Microsoft online, and I'm a typical insomniac, which is good for traveling because my sleep patterns are already skewed. And he said, we just have a conversation, and I said that's the best part about your stories is that you share. I love listening to everybody that you've had on your show, honestly, to all of the people that have come before us and will come after. Thank you for sharing your journey with us, because it helps inspire us and give us ideas and strategies so that we can continue to be, successful in our travel journeys. And the other portion of that for me is that's why I wanted to create my travel blog. I often have been asked many, many times by people, what are your favorite places? Where do you go? How do you travel with kids? How do you do these things? What are some romantic destinations you would go to? And, there's always excuses. I don't have enough time. I'm too busy. And we are busy people. We work full time. We have 2 young children, 2 older children. We have COVID, pandemics, pandemonium. There's a lot going on in the world. But Corona's given us a chance to pause and reevaluate what's important and where we want to spend our time and efforts and energy. And, when you think about Uncle Willie's 100 years on Earth, or your father or my grandmother or Jay's, I just think how much I would have loved to hear their story and journeys. Jay's grandparents went to Japan and they had this beautiful picture in a kimono. It's a black and white photo. And I don't know anything about those stories. I don't know what their experience was like. I don't know what they shared. And it just gives me goosebumps talking about it, because for me, I want my children, which was the original effort and intention, to hear the stories. They're young. They may not remember all of it, as we discussed. They may remember how it made them feel. They may remember elements or see a photo that brings back a memory. But that's why video is also so important as well, because you hear the voice and you hear the wind howling in the trees, and you hear the monkeys in the background, and you hear these things that kind of resonate, and it sparks something in your memories that says, wow, do you remember that, the way that sound was, or the smell? And it just almost all comes rushing back to you. And so I had heart surgery 2 years ago. And when I had that experience and they're wheeling you into the hospital room, you think about your life and you think about your mortality, and you think that, what is the legacy I want to leave behind? What are the memories I want to share? And so for me, if I can change or inspire one person to see something or to try something new, then that would be really awesome. I think it would be a great gift to give people.
Oh, fantastic. We need to use these as the intro spiel for the new members to the group, because it is so well said. And of the nitty gritty of this, I heard about 3,000 pictures a day as a joke, but maybe not a joke. How are you? You set up the website. How are you organizing? I mean, it's painful to delete, but I guess sometimes you might delete, or you just what tools are you using? Anything to help us? I've wanted to go through my photos the past few months, and I have been overwhelmed and haven't started.
So I'll give you the high level, and I'll let Jay get to the detail. He's the detail guy, and I'm the emotional one.
I'll interrupt and say I learned he's the detail guy because at that funeral, I noticed my watch had stopped that day, and I hadn't had a chance for a battery change. So he is very the detail guy.
Your watch was right twice during the day.
So, and for me, one of the most important things, I mentioned the Peru trip, it was actually a really crazy story. And this happened to me once actually in South Africa, and it's happened to me before, where I had a camera that was stolen. And so there was a girl on the trip, and she was from Colombia, and she was a fellow student, and she asked if she could put her camera bag under our stroller. And there was she had gone to the ATM prior to this, and two men were outside and they were watching her. And when she came to the restaurant, there was probably 20 of us sitting around, eating, having conversation, laughing, talking. And our two children were sleeping in the stroller. On the camera footage, we later learned when they went back and looked at everything, a man went in, pretended to go to the bathroom, sat at the table, dropped a napkin, picked up her camera bag, and walked out the door. And all of her photos from 2 weeks of that trip went with it. And it felt awful. I mean, take the camera, leave the memory card, right? Because that's the important part. And so one of the things that really struck me in that moment was I have a beautiful DSLR. They're expensive. They take amazing pictures. I fear that I will lose them. So if you're not coming back every night and uploading them into the cloud or uploading them into some sort of file system, that you're going to not lose them, or switching out your memory cards and putting them in a different spot, all of your memories can be swept away very simply. And that's terrible. The other thing is I actually quite a bit use my iPhone. They take fantastic pictures. The resolution and quality on the latest iPhone is so incredible, with the night vision and sports mode and portrait mode, that you get fantastic photos. You always have it with you, so you never know when a good opportunity will present itself to take a photo. So it's just a convenient, inconspicuous tool to like hide or put it in your fanny pack or whatever you want to do, right? But once that's done, then we have a process which is very date oriented, which Jay can walk you through.
Being a computer guy, my mom was a computer teacher, so I started storing when I was 11 years old. Every dollar I spent, every report card and book report became digital, every receipt. So I triangulate my life every day chronologically, and I could go back and look at things in multiple different ways. But today I would say to everybody listening, now that we're a little bit restricted from travel because of COVID, is the time to look digitally. Make sure that your photos that are out there on PCs that are one virus away or one crash away from your losing, USB sticks and other things, time to consolidate. Cloud storage, whether it's a Google, Microsoft, whether it's Dropbox or Apple, all these kind of storage, it's a couple of dollars a month. I mean, we have terabytes. I was joking that Google, named a wing of their data center after us. It's not just all of our pictures. But, I have this chronological thing where I dump. And then, I also have a 4 terabyte drive, which cost, again, pennies to the dollar. That makes it redundant. So if our, God forbid, something happened to our house, it's in the cloud. If something happened to the cloud, it's in our house. I've got it in 2 places, and it's chronological. So we've got hundreds of thousands of pictures and videos, and we do it by day. So we're talking about a tool like Timehop, which reminds me that last year, exactly right now, as we're on this podcast, we were floating in the Dead Sea on our way to Petra, Jordan. So every day, every year, going backwards for 20 years, I know where I was on this planet, and I can go back to that day in the cloud or on my system and put together. And as she's building this blog and the videos and stuff like that, we look at it very linear in terms of time. We've been back to many countries like Australia 4 times. It's not about a folder that says Australia. It's about the 2018 trip or the 2016 trip. Going back to the specific days and the events and the memories, and then building out from there and making sure that you have the technology and obviously the backed up technology to be able to do that.
And also, we always check in either Facebook, Instagram, all of those social tools. We have the ability to go in. So if I wanted to look on Facebook or Instagram, I can roughly be right, or I can type in simply, the search algorithms are so fantastic where you can say Ragusa-McBain, Cambodia photos. And then I'll see both of our trips, the one to Phnom Penh and the one that we most recently took. And I can decide, do I want to see the trip to Angkor Wat, or do I want to see the original trip? And I can choose in that blog what I want to pull from. And then we just go back to our database and pull the high-res photos. And you made a great point earlier, which is when you use the free storage, they often make the photos low resolution. So contingent upon what you want to do with that, you're really not getting the best quality for the future. So for a very nominal fee, you're going to retain the quality and integrity of the photography that you're taking, which is pretty important, I think.
Excellent. And how do you extend all that organization to tracking expenses? I'm really bad about
also Jay.
what tools, what organization.
It's
easy to just be taking money out of the ATM and it goes here and there.
Yeah. So again, back to being 11 years old, I wrote a blog about this, but I built my own program on an Apple II back when I was 11 years old, which is basically turned into Quicken and Microsoft Money. Every dollar I've ever spent or earned, it's tracked. Where I spent it, what I spent it on. My first dollar from my first paper route, I bought a Slurpee and a pack of hockey cards. Right up until today, I could give you a pie chart to the second decimal point of every dollar I've ever spent. It's the reason I don't drink. It's the reason I never did drugs, because I watch it to that level. But when we travel, the thing about money is everything's electronic and it becomes part of that timeline. So instead of going to search Facebook for Cambodia, I can search Mint, which is a program that pulls together all your finances and your net worth. I can go track Quicken and go find the money we spent at the hotel, the ticket to Angkor Wat. I mean, that day we used our credit card 12 times. That financial track links to the pictures, links to the documentation, our plane tickets and everything else. That trifecta is organization. It's all chronological.
And oddly enough, 11 of those times were my credit card.
On trinkets, on little doodads that are sitting behind us if you look through the glass.
So the biggest thing, the only thing that we could not agree on, because we agree on so many things, were I love, let's call them tchotchkes for this use. When I go to a place, I want a little doodad that I can remember the place, and it brings back those memories for me. So I collect just little simple things that I find, and I keep them in my office behind me as a memory of all of the places that we have been to. And they light up, and it's an incredible use of space for me. And while Jay does not love it, he understands and appreciates that it's part of my journey.
It makes our luggage heavier.
That's fantastic. I think we need to bring you back for a course in organization and tracking. I certainly, as I said, I had good intentions these months. I put my energy into the videos than organizing my photos. So
if we look at, we both kind of carry a travel blog, but hers is the main one with all the stories, the pictures, the videos, the feeling, and you immerse yourself. You look at my blogs, it's this ticket, how we did the spreadsheet to figure out the route, how we, planes, trains, and automobiles.
I'll redirect to his.
It's all the architecture behind the trip. So if you actually wanted to, get inspired by Michelle and figure out how to go do that, mine is kind of the full list of the actual tactical actions that you need to take.
You're just going to put them in my blog, and then we'll be fine.
Well, delightful to have you both. In terms of organization and productivity, I have to join this meeting, so that's life in the pandemic world. Thank you for joining us. Wonderful conversation, Jay and Michelle.
Thank you so much for having us.